Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Gavin Esler. My guest today has been a candidate for the leadership of the British Conservative Party. He's also made a name for himself as a civil liberties campaigner, arguing against what is sometimes called the surveillance state. So what does David Davis make of the massive collection of data by the US National Security Agency and Britain's GCHQ revealed by the American whistleblower Edward Snowden? In the years since the 9/11 attacks, have we got the balance wrong between liberty and security? David Davis, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
Were you surprised by the sheer scale of the Snowden revelations, the piles and piles of stuff which is collected by the Americans and the British and the intelligence agencies go through?
Not really. I was surprised by what appears to be the compliance of people like Google and Yahoo and Facebook and all the other big names in the data handling industry, if you like, in the internet industry. But I wasn't surprised by the fact it goes on. When you recruit spooks, you recruit people who go to the edge for what they see as a national interest. And these people have gone right to the edge of what the law allows.
And let's begin where you begin on this then. There's nothing wrong with spying.
Nothing wrong with spying, as long as it's properly targeted, properly focused on the people who are the real enemies of the state. And
there's nothing wrong, presumably, in using the best technology, and if people are communicating by emails and other means, then that has to be looked at too.
Absolutely.
So where's the problem?
The problem is, well, firstly, the problem is in the law. What was done looks as though, it's not quite clear, looks as though it was legal, certainly under American law, because American law treats American citizens very, very different from everybody else in the world. You and I might as well be North Koreans or Iranians or whatever as far as the American law is concerned, so we have no rights. So that's unsurprising in that respect. The other aspect, of course, is British law. And GCHQ, interestingly in this, appears to have said to the Americans the opposite of what they've been saying to parliamentary committees. Namely, they said, oh, British surveillance law is very light touch, very unrestrictive. Now, those things, that's what's really important about this. They have exploited the law to its limit. What we are now discovering is what that really means for ordinary British citizens. And
GCHQ is, of course, the Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ. But the justification for what's gone on was put by the NSA director, Keith Alexander, who said Prism and Tempora, the code names for these operations, help prevent more than 50 potential terrorist events. President Obama said it's a circumscribed, narrow system directed at us being able to protect our people. All of it is done under the oversight of the courts, and we have saved lives. So he says it's within the law, and we have saved lives, prevented terrorism.
Firstly, they're talking about American citizens, not you and me. You know, there's no protection of the law there, so understand that. When the Americans talk about this, it's American citizens they're talking about. But there's also the standard deception in this. It's not quite an untruth, but it is a deception. And that is this gathering, let's say, of 300 million pieces of information has helped us stop these 5, 10, 15, I don't know, 50 crimes. But actually you could stop those 15 to 50 crimes by a much, much narrower, more focused collection. In other words, not impinging on your privacy or my privacy, not putting our privacy at risk. And that's the problem. The problem is that they've gone this really crude way of sweeping everything up, and it doesn't actually deliver the best security. But examples in Britain, I'll tell you about in a second, but that doesn't...
Well, coming on to Britain, I mean, the Foreign Secretary here, William Hague, he's also been very clear. He said, if you're a law-abiding citizen, you have nothing to fear about the British state or intelligence agencies listening to the content of your phone calls or anything like that.
Tell that to Doreen Lawrence. Tell that to Doreen Lawrence.
Doreen Lawrence, the mother of
the young man who was murdered. There was a very abortive police inquiry into it. At one stage of it, they started to look to see if they could get dirt on Doreen Lawrence using intercept techniques. And I'm afraid that isn't the only example in British history that's happened, that something like that has happened. The Americans, you had the Clinton holding of FBI files on people. Governments, I'm afraid, even democratic governments, or their bureaucracies, maybe not the individuals at the top, their bureaucracies misuse powers if they're allowed to.
But you might be out of touch with what British citizens feel about this, because recent YouGov poll says if you're asked to balance security and privacy, 19% put privacy against security, 42% put security ahead of privacy.
Forgive me, but it's a dumb question. Not that you gave to me, but the YouGov put to the people.
It's a smart answer, though, isn't it? we prefer to be secure, and we don't really worry about our emails. It's all nonsense.
Well,
anyway.
they do if they're involved in it. They do if they think it applies to them. Most people think this doesn't apply to me. You know, my emails are not being looked at or whatever. There are two foolishnesses in the question, or two deceptions again in the question. Number one is that there's a trade-off. Remember what happened in 7/7 with the attack on Britain, 52 people killed. Horrible crime, right? Those criminals, terrorists if you want to call them that, those criminals were known to MI5 and the police. They were recorded plotting actions against the state or talking about such actions. They had their addresses, they bugged a car, and yet they did nothing about it. Why? Because they had so much information they couldn't deal with it. Right? And what we're doing is going down a whole strategy which involves creating vast quantities of information, most of which is completely useless, but it puts everybody's privacy at risk and actually doesn't that much enhance their abilities.
But then you do accept, presumably, what President Obama and Keith Alexander are saying, that this does save lives. It's just that it could be done more effectively.
It could be done better with less. I mean, this is using a shotgun when a rifle would work. This is not focusing sufficiently on the people who should be targeted very closely and using a sort of great hoover to pull everything in.
And are you saying that since 9/11 and 7/7 in Britain, the tube bombings, that we have lost the sense of balance that we had it before?
Well,
because presumably before we did it with just different kinds of technology.
Even at 9/11, I mean, most Brits have not read the 9/11 Commission report, which led to the departure of the CIA head, you know, the chief of the CIA. Why? Because they weren't using the information they had. They weren't circulating, didn't give it to the FBI. The people involved, or some of the people involved in the 9/11 planning and the 9/11 execution, were in the United States and known to the CIA, and nothing was done about it, and complete with warnings that went with it. So the issue here is focusing and using the information you've got, not going out and harvesting everybody. It's a very powerful feeling to go out and be able to get at everything, you know. I have no objection if you're a spook and you think there's a real reason for investigating somebody, getting a judge, a magistrate, depending on what country you're in, to say, yes, you can do that, and go do it. What I do have an objection to is being able to do it just willy-nilly with any citizen of any state.
But your argument was put by somebody else in saying that you don't look for a needle in a haystack by making a bigger haystack.
Or many
bigger haystacks.
Exactly.
But just
get a magnet.
Just to focus on the legality of it, you've been very clear that we're foreigners under US law. But here in Britain, the Foreign Secretary, Mr. Haig, says intelligence gathering in this country by the United Kingdom is governed by a very strong legal framework. Do you accept that?
Well, no, I don't. GCHQ said the opposite to their American cousins. And one element we know about, that we've been told about anyway in the press, is that whole blocks of information from British residents, I don't know if they're citizens, but all British residents that go abroad, and that will include if I emailed you via Google, because it will go to a foreign server. Whole blocks of that data are made available to the Americans on an unrestricted basis. They don't check to see whether you and I are terrorists, they just take everything and give it to them. Now, that can be done legally under an authorization from the Secretary of State, a rather narrow, almost loophole in the law. But I was involved in writing those laws. I was the minister that took the SIS bill through the House of Commons, the Secret Intelligence...
popularly known as MI6.
The MI6 bill through the House of Commons. We did not countenance this when we created these options. We were thinking about the sort of bugging, blackmail, burglary that MI6 normally do, not these huge sweeps of data. And what we've got, therefore, is this enormous, it's not a loophole, so much a channel tunnel right through the law. And what it means, let me give you one little interestingly controversial example of what it might mean. There's a thing called the Wilson Doctrine, which means that I, as a Member of Parliament, cannot have my communications intercepted, that's phone or anything else, without the explicit approval of the Prime Minister. Yeah, this goes right round that.
But you said there's a channel tunnel going through our law.
Yeah.
obviously the Foreign Secretary disagrees with you. He says it's authorised,
necessary,
necessary,
say that,
proportionate. Well, indeed. But he says it's authorised, necessary, proportionate and targeted. Yeah. But it's not just him. Lord West, the former Minister for Security and Intelligence under the Labour government, says it's fanciful to think that GCHQ are working at ways of circumventing our laws. It's extraordinary that we have this paranoia about our own people. They're on our side.
They don't need to circumvent our laws. The problem is the laws are too weak in this respect. That's the problem. William was right about one thing. It's legal. That's what that bit he's right.
It is legal.
Proportionate, I really don't think so. Not the entire internet traffic going through this country being put into a huge sump, if you like, that the Americans then control.
How about necessary then?
No, not necessary, because there are better ways of doing it. We come back to the focusing on the actual targets. Mostly what they do, most of what's done by the agencies. I mean, I've got to be a bit careful how I wander into this, but most of what's done by the agencies are finding one end of a communication to a known terrorist in Iraq or in Afghanistan, or indeed in any Western country, and then tracking out from that, radiating out from that, and finding others and so on. Now, that sort of thing is very, very effective. And right enough, I don't mind if they have access to the entire traffic if they're carrying that out, if it's a properly controlled exercise. Apart from anything else, it's far more effective, it's far more manpower effective, and it works nearly all the time. So it's what actually we did in Iraq to eradicate Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
So what would you do then? You would redraft the law to make it sharper, but you're also telling people to look at smaller haystacks. And
haystacks. I mean, the French, for example, if I remember the numbers correctly, do about 60,000 intercepts a year of the sort we're talking about. And when I say intercept, I'm not just talking about phone intercept. And they're targeted on a whole series of people they think are high risk. Not terrorists, but high-risk people, and that's under a magistrate's instruction or overview, and that's fine. I'm happy with that. The Germans have a system which is incredibly fierce in terms of restricting people by comparison with us. I don't notice any of those having a worse terrorist problem than we do.
Well, I'm smiling at this because you're also known here as being, let's put it this way, not the greatest person in favour of the European Union. But in terms of we might get onto that before the end of it. But in terms of the French and Germans' handling of intelligence and doing their snooping, you think they do it better than us in the sense of...
Yes, I do. I think. Look, I mean, there's another whole game in this, which I probably should touch on in a second. But broadly speaking, in terms of domestic... control of domestic surveillance and doing some domestic, I think both of them do that better than us, no doubt about it. And they're both major countries. These are not sort of hillbillies here. We're talking about real major countries doing a better job than us. Can I make one point, which is different between us and Germany and France? I may explain part of the difference. When we're at the end of empire, post 45. Allies with the Americans, we had a trade, or we had Bletchley Park, of course, which was world famous for being very good at what it did. The predecessor of GCHQ, and in its way, a much more salient player than GCHQ. But when we went on from there, we had another chip in the game in dealing with the American NSA, in dealing with the trade. And our chip in the game were big listening posts in Hong Kong and Cyprus, which gave us a lot of traffic the Americans couldn't get at. So we had a reasonably fair trade. Now, that was very important to us in maintaining the intelligence relationship, which between Britain and America is the closest in the world, really, outside sort of the Soviets with each other. It's closest in the free world, certainly. And now what this may be is, if you like, a similar sort of chip in the game, and allowing the Americans effectively to hoover through what is this huge amount of internet traffic, maybe our chip, the replacement for Hong Kong and Cyprus and so on.
Right. Now, but in terms of Edward Snowden himself, then, do you see him as a traitor, which many people in the United States appear to do, or do you see him as somebody who has alerted us to a great danger to our civil liberties, and perhaps he should be offered political asylum in Britain?
I don't see him as a traitor. I think the Americans have a habit of getting very heavy-handed about these things. And I do see him as a whistleblower, but there's no doubt he has broken the law, and he's also broken the contracts he took when he went to work for these agencies. So if he were a British citizen, I would say he should face some sort of recourse. but it should be offset by the public interest aspect of what he did.
Isn't the big picture now, though, that there is no such thing as privacy? And it's not just, you know, we talked about the surveillance state. It's not just the state. It's the supermarkets. They can find out what you're doing. CCTV, it says journalists who can bug your phone.
Of course.
Or, you know.
But there's been a bit of a scandal about that.
There has been a bit of a scandal.
And we are sort of rolling that back a bit.
But isn't that one of the good things about the information state, which is that information age, that we get to find out about this and we can react, or eventually we can be calm about it.
Eventually we do. I mean, interestingly, let me just pick one example for you. Tom Watson, who's been in the news for other things recently. Member
of Parliament for Labour, who's a big campaigner over irregularities, shall we say, and abuses in the press.
Why did he pick that up? Why did he really go for this big fight with the Murdoch press? Because he believed the Murdoch press, in intruding into his privacy and the way they did it, broke his family up. Yeah? Now, that's one example. And I could give you lots and lots of others. The Lawrences I mentioned. I don't want to sort of end up explaining everything on air, but there are lots of examples, I'm afraid, of the misuse. Now, this is not just the state. It's any big corporation, any big bureaucracy tends to ignore the rules that they think shouldn't impinge on them. Well, and they do real harm.
But I was intrigued, as I suggested, about what you said about Germany and France, because some of the things you say have been echoed very strongly by the Europeans.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're very irritated that they've been bugged by the Americans.
And I hate to tell you, I'll never say this ever again on your programme or before. I think this is one area where the European Union might be the only answer. Actually,
really?
In dealing with the Americans, yeah. They're the only ones big enough to play in that game. Well, we could, but frankly, historically, we have been supine with respect to the Americans in this area. It's been our nature. It's part of the so-called special relationship. I think the Europeans will be cross enough to actually exercise the power that says, I'm sorry, but you have to think a bit more about people who are not citizens of the US and what their rights are. Because citizens of the US get absolute privacy rights, but nobody else does.
Do you think then that the European Union might end up protecting our privacy?
It might do.
Better than we're doing at the moment?
I think so. Well, it'd be hard to be less, because it's such a weak arrangement.
For viewers around the world who don't know your political track record in the EU, that is quite an extraordinary statement.
And the ones inside the UK will be sitting there in shock, but I'm afraid it's true.
It's true. Well, in that case, I mean, Liberty, the civil liberties campaigners in this country, with whom you've worked on other matters, they believe that their electronic communications and those of its staff may have been unlawfully accessed by GCHQ, the security services. And they're contending, I'm quoting here, that rights under Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, the right to respect for one's private life, private and family life, home and correspondence, have been breached.
Yeah, quite likely.
Even though you dislike the Human Rights Act or the way in which it's been enforced. That's something you sign up to.
It's ECHR, in effect.
I mean,
I don't like the Human Rights Act for other reasons.
Because it brings it here.
Yeah, I think the core of the ECHR is important to keep. I mean, I've always argued this.
Important to keep.
Oh yeah, it's the extensive sort of use of it in trivial areas that are not so sensible. But it's quite likely. I mean, just to take my own example. I mean, I've campaigned on torture and American use of torture, rendition, and so on. So my name probably would come up reasonably, actually, on the American list. Why not? I would expect it to. And they would hoover it up from anything that had gone through that great tract of stuff that GCHQ hand over to the Americans, by the sounds of it, every day.
Theresa May, the Home Secretary, has been saying that we must also consider our relationship with the European Court. This is to do with the Abu Qatada case. Yeah. And I believe that all options, including withdrawal from the Convention, the European Convention on Human Rights altogether, should remain on the table. Now, where do you stand on that?
I'm not with her on that. I mean, there may well be derogations we need to seek, but the problem here is quite simple. The original convention, which was signed in the early 50s, was quite tightly drawn and quite explicit. And the court, the European Court, has gone beyond it. It has a doctrine. It's called the living instrument doctrine for those aficionados of these things. But what it means is they interpret it in the light of modern day life. So, as we speak, there's just come out, and just in the last few hours or days, come out a suggestion that we can no longer send people to prison for their entire lives. It's a terrible crime. We've got to hold open the option of letting them out. That sort of thing is way beyond their remit. It's way beyond what was originally intended by the founders of the European Convention, and we should pull it back to the original aims, which was to stop torture, murder, state murder, state torture, state improper imprisonment. Those are the big things. That's what really matters.
So just so I absolutely understand this, you do not think that we should withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights.
No, I don't.
You do think that we can change it, renegotiate it, and take it back to its
what it was.
Or
derogate little bits of it. That's right. Yeah.
So derogate little bits, so we're not covered by those little bits. And which little bits would those be?
Oh, well, I can't remember off the top of my head what the individual clauses are, but some of them are really about interpretation more than the actual wording there. And we could say to the court, well, if you insist on doing this, we'll derogate from that clause. You can't derogate from all clauses. But the bits I'm concerned about are things like giving prisoners votes. That's our business. If we want to give them votes, we can. No, but it's for the Brits to decide, not for the Europeans. If we want to say somebody should go to prison forever because he's killed his entire family and all their or a whole series of other people, which are the sorts of case we're talking about, we should be able to say so. It's not for a court to tell Parliament what to do.
We've just got a few minutes left. I wanted to bring you back to some of the domestic political issues, particularly UKIP, UK Independence Party, the challenge to the Conservatives and so on. You've been very interesting, some of the things you've been writing about that, suggesting, in effect, that there's something to do with the relationship between David Cameron leadership and ordinary people isn't working. It's a class matter.
Well, class is the way it's characterised. But what it's really about is people feeling that we're out of touch with them. And it's not just David. I mean, it's not just David. This is a party thing, truthfully. We're out of touch with them. There was a survey in the last few days which said that the majority of the party felt that we did not respect them. You know, the leadership did not respect them. Now that's really serious, and I think it extends beyond the actual party membership to the voters. And one of the reasons that UKIP have done very well in the last local elections was people saying, I mean, I was stood on a polling station. They said, oh, if you people are so, forgive the language, are so bloody rude, we're going to vote for UKIP because somebody referred to them, I forgot who it was now, as starry-eyed or
swivel-eyed loons.
Swivel-eyed loons. So, and we should never do that. That's a really, really, really big no-no in politics.
You shouldn't criticise the voters in that way. But does it puzzle you that there are so many old Etonians in the kind of inner circle of David Cameron?
Well, I can understand how it's come about. When I was in business, we used to have rules to prevent an individual recruiting people just like himself, because we all do it. You know, I'd be inclined to recruit sort of white middle class, ex-working class grammar school boys, I suspect, you know, if I was left to it. And you've got to aim wider than that. I've said to them, look, I don't care if you're all Nobel Prize winners in physics. If you're all the same, it makes you blind in some areas. I think that is an issue.
And that blindness, the voters get that, do they?
Well,
and they don't see it in UKIP, for example.
I think that's why UKIP are doing well. I mean, what's UKIP? UKIP is a sort of primary colours Conservative party, really. You know, they're sort of they're sort of caricature of the 80s Thatcher party, if you like. And it's a nice, simple message to get across. And to people who feel that we are not reflecting their views, we're not talking enough about Europe or immigration or low taxation or whatever, partly because we're constrained by the coalition, then they feel, oh, we're going to go somewhere else.
Well, maybe one of David Cameron's obvious answers to this is to promote a guy with a working class background, a grammar school boy who perhaps...
I can see where you're going.
You see where I'm going? A reshuffle, a cabinet reshuffle.
It's not one for me to get involved in.
But that kind of person.
Well, I think he should think about the sort of people he's putting up front, certainly. And there are plenty in our benches, actually, of people from pretty lowly backgrounds, very capable, who maybe he should think about giving. I mean, we worry about the number of women, we worry about the number of ethnic minorities. Perhaps we should worry about the number of people who just the ordinary public would identify with.
And just a final thought.
And that's not me.
No, it's not you. You're ruling yourself out for the cabinet.
I don't think that's an issue that's going to face me.
That's not an issue that affects you. And just a final thought. I mentioned in our introduction that you ran twice for the leadership of the party. Is the third time a charm? I mean, would you consider it again?
I don't think... I'll be about 95 by the time this issue comes up again. So it's not one that worries me.
David Davis, thank you very much.
My pleasure.